While we've been on air in the last hour, the prosecution in the Donald Trump hush money trial have said they are resting their case. They spent the afternoon trying to rehabilitate their key witness, Michael Cohen. The redirect, as it's known, was their opportunity to focus the jury's attention on the corroborated evidence that he has already supplied. But it's been a bruising few days for Trump's former lawyer and advisor, as the defence spent hours poking holes in his story, today getting him to admit on the stand that he'd once stolen money from the Trump administration. Certainly, as we've discussed before, he's a flawed witness, but did he lie on Trump's behalf? Did Trump ask Cohen to pay Stormy Daniels for her silence? And did he disguise that payment as a legal expense to hide it from the New York voters?
So we need to talk about what happened in that courtroom, because it was absolutely insane. Donald Trump, the President of the United States, was sitting in a New York courtroom for his civil fraud trial, and things were not going well. Michael Cohen was on the stand, Trump's former lawyer, the guy who knows all of Trump's secrets, and he was testifying against him, describing the fraud, laying out the evidence, making Trump look really bad. And Trump's lawyers, they were trying everything, objecting, cross-examining, and finally, they asked Judge Arthur Engoron to just dismiss the whole case, to throw it out, to say Cohen's testimony wasn't credible enough, and the trial should end right there. And Engoron looked at them, listened to their arguments, and said, "No, there's no way I'm dismissing this case. The trial continues." And Trump, he just stood up and walked out, just left the courtroom, flanked by Secret Service, stormed out in front of everyone, lawyers, court officers, reporters, all of them watching the President of the United States throw a tantrum and leave because he didn't like what the judge said.
No, he won't. His lawyers have indicated that they will be calling Robert Costello, who is now on the stand, who's a lawyer who served as an intermediary between the Trump camp and Michael Cohen. They've also indicated that they may call a former commissioner of the Federal Election Commission. But they've given no sign that they're thinking of calling their client to the stand. And it would be suicidal for Trump to testify in his own defense, and his lawyers know that.
So Trump walked out, and that in itself is wild. But here's what makes it even crazier. This isn't the only time judges have had to deal with Trump's courtroom behavior. In his Manhattan hush money criminal trial, the one where he was actually convicted of 34 felonies, Judge Juan Miron has held Trump in contempt multiple times. Multiple times for violating a gag order, for attacking witnesses and jurors on social media, for refusing to follow the rules everyone else has to follow. And Merchan started with fines, $1,000 per violation, which for Trump is pocket change. It's nothing. So the fines didn't stop him. He kept violating the gag order, kept posting, kept attacking people, and Merchan had to escalate. He ordered Trump to delete the offending posts, warned him that more violations would lead to serious consequences. And finally, Merchant put Trump on notice. He said, "If you keep this up, if you keep violating my orders, I'm going to consider jail time." Jail time for a sitting president, for a former president, for someone who thinks he's above the law. And Mann was clear. He said this would be a last resort. That jailing a president is something no judge wants to do. But if it's necessary to protect the integrity of the trial, if it's the only way to make Trump follow the rules, then he'll do it. Think about that for a second. We're talking about a scenario where the President of the United States could be held in contempt and jailed, where a judge could order marshals to take him into custody, to put him in a cell, to physically restrain the most powerful person in America because he refuses to follow basic courtroom rules. That's where we are. That's how far Trump has pushed things. And the craziest part, Trump doesn't seem to care. He keeps pushing, keeps defying, keeps acting like the rules don't apply to him, because in his mind, they don't. He's Donald Trump. He's the president. And presidents don't go to jail. Presidents don't get held in contempt. Presidents do whatever they want. But judges are starting to send a different message. They're saying, no, you're not special. You follow the same rules as everyone else. And if you don't, there will be consequences, real consequences. Not just fines you can ignore, but jail time, physical custody, the kind of consequence that even Donald Trump can't spin or tweet his way out of. And that walkout, that moment where Trump just stood up and left the courtroom, that was Trump testing boundaries, seeing what he could get away with, trying to intimidate the judge in the process. And Judge Engoron, he let Trump leave. He didn't order marshals to block the exits. He didn't hold Trump in contempt right then and there. But the message was sent. Trump walked out, and nothing he did changed the outcome. The case continued, the trial went on, and Trump came back later because he had no choice. Because you can't just leave your own trial and expect it to go away. That's not how the legal system works, even for presidents, even for people who think they're untouchable. So let's dig into what actually happened in these courtrooms, why Trump's behavior is so dangerous, and what judges can actually do about it. All right, so let's start with the civil fraud trial walkout, because that was dramatic. This was October 2023. Trump was in court every day, required to be there sitting through testimony about his business practices, about how he inflated property values, about how his company committed fraud to get better loans. And it was not going well for him. The evidence was piling up. Witnesses were contradicting his claims. And then Michael Cohen took the stand. Cohen, Trump's former fixer, the guy who handled all of Trump's dirty work for years. And he was testifying for the prosecution, describing in detail how Trump's organization manipulated financial statements, how they lied to banks, how they knew exactly what they were doing. And Trump's lawyers were trying to discredit Cohen. They brought up his criminal record, his lies, his motivation to hurt Trump. And during cross-examination, Cohen gave what Trump's team thought was a crucial admission, something equivocal, something they could use to argue the case should be dismissed. So Trump's lawyers immediately moved for a mistrial. They asked Judge Engoron to throw out the whole case, to say Cohen's testimony was so unreliable that nothing from the trial could be trusted. And this is a common defense tactic. You try to get the case dismissed at every opportunity. Sometimes it works, usually it doesn't, but you have to try. So Ingram heard the arguments, considered the motion, and ruled. He said, "There's no way I'm dismissing this case." One equivocal answer from one witness doesn't undo all the other evidence. The documentary proof, the testimony from other witnesses, the financial records showing fraud. This trial is continuing. Motion denied. And that's when Trump snapped. According to reporters in the room, Trump stood up, didn't say anything to the judge, didn't ask permission to leave, just stood up and with Secret Service agents and aides flanking him, walked out of the courtroom, just left in the middle of the proceedings while court was still in session. And everyone was stunned. Lawyers were shouting. Cohen was still on the stand. The trial was ongoing. And the defendant, the guy whose fraud trial this was, and just walked out. Can you imagine? Imagine you're on trial for anything, and you just decide, you know what? I don't like how this is going. I'm leaving. You'd be held in contempt immediately. Marshals would stop you. You'd be dragged back into court. But Trump, he just left and nothing happened. Not right away. Now, to be clear, Trump did eventually come back. He returned to the courthouse later. He didn't skip out on the trial permanently, but the act itself, the defiance, the disrespect for the court, it was shocking because it showed Trump thinks he's above the normal rules, that he can just leave when things don't go his way, that judges can't control him. And Engoron, to his credit, he didn't let it derail the trial. He kept going. The case continued, and ultimately Engoron found Trump liable for fraud, imposed restrictions on his business, ordered monitoring. So Trump's walkout didn't accomplish anything legally, but it accomplished something politically. It showed his supporters that he's a fighter, that he won't bow down to judges he thinks are corrupt, that he'll stand up and walk out rather than submit. And for his base, that's powerful imagery. That's their guy refusing to play by rules he thinks are rigged against him. But here's the thing. Judges have tools to deal with this kind of behavior. They can hold people in contempt. They can fine them. They can order them removed from the courtroom. They can even jail them if necessary. And in Trump's criminal trial, Judge McCone used those tools. Because Trump wasn't just walking out, he was actively violating court orders, specifically the gag order. Judges in high-profile cases often issue gag orders to protect the integrity of the trial, to prevent defendants from intimidating witnesses, from influencing jurors, from creating a circus that makes it impossible to have a fair trial. And Merchan issued a gag order in the hush money case. He told Trump, you can't attack witnesses, you can't post about jurors, you can't use your platform to undermine this trial. And Trump immediately violated it. Over and over, he posted on Truth Social, attacking Michael Cohen, attacking Stormy Daniels, making comments about the jury, doing exactly what the judge said not to do. So Merchan held a hearing, found Trump in contempt, issued a fine, $1,000, and ordered Trump to delete the offending posts. And Trump paid the fine, deleted some posts, and then violated the gag order again. So Mann held another contempt hearing, another fine, another deletion order. And this happened multiple times. Each time, Trump would push a little further, test the boundaries, see what he could get away with. And each time, Mershon would impose consequences. But the fines weren't working. $1,000 means nothing to Trump. He's got millions. Paying fines is just the cost of doing business for him. So Merch had to escalate. He warned Trump. He said, look, these fines aren't stopping you, so I'm putting you on notice. If you violate this gag order again, I'm going to consider jail time. And I don't want to jail a president. I don't want to jail anyone. But if that's what it takes to protect this trial, to ensure witnesses can testify without being intimidated, to make sure jurors aren't influenced by your social media attacks, then I'll do it. I'll order you taken into custody and you'll sit in a cell until this trial is over. And that warning, that threat of actual jail time, it got Trump's attention. Because jail is different from fines. Jail means losing freedom. It means physical custody. It means Secret Service can't protect you from the consequences. It means the world sees you in handcuffs in a holding cell, treated like any other defendant who defies a judge. And Trump, for all his bravado, he doesn't want that. So the violations slowed down. He became more careful. He still pushed boundaries, still made comments that skirted the line, but he stopped the blatant violations because he knew Merchant wasn't bluffing, that the threat of jail was real, and that unlike fines, jail time would actually hurt him, both practically and politically. But here's the deeper issue. We're in this situation where judges have to threaten presidents with jail to make them follow basic courtroom rules, because Trump fundamentally doesn't believe those rules apply to him. He thinks he's special, that being president or former president puts him above the law, that judges can't control him. And he's been testing that belief his entire legal life. And mostly, he's gotten away with it. He's delayed cases for years. He's settled lawsuits without admitting wrongdoing. He's used his wealth and power to avoid real accountability. But now, with criminal charges, with judges willing to escalate, with contempt citations and threats of jail, Trump's running into limits he can't overcome through money or intimidation or delay tactics. And it's creating this incredible tension in courtrooms because judges have enormous power in their courtrooms. They control what happens there. They can remove a disruptive people. They can hold anyone in contempt. They can order marshals to enforce their rulings. But Trump's not just anyone. He's the president. He's got Secret Service protection. He's got political power. He's got millions of supporters who will claim judicial overreach if a judge jails him. So judges are in this impossible position. Do they enforce normal rules on Trump, knowing it'll create a political firestorm? Or do they give him special treatment, effectively admitting that powerful people get different justice than everyone else? And different judges are handling it differently. But the ones willing to escalate, like Mershon, they're sending a message. You're not above the law. You follow the rules like everyone else. And if you don't, there will be consequences. Now, let's talk about what judges can actually do, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. People claiming judges ordered all exits blocked when Trump walked out, that they had marshals ready to arrest him. That's not quite accurate. When Trump walked out of the civil trial, Ingram let him go. He didn't order anyone to stop Trump. He didn't hold him in contempt right then because it's complicated. Trump didn't technically refuse a direct court order. He just left, which is disrespectful and inappropriate, but not necessarily contempt in that moment. If Ingram had said, "You're not allowed to leave," and Trump left anyway, that would be contempt. But Ingram didn't give that order, so Trump walked out without immediate consequences. But judges do have power to control their courtrooms. If someone's being disruptive, if they're refusing to follow orders, judges can remove them. They can have them held in a separate room with a video feed of the trial. They can continue the trial without them present. They can fine them. They can jail them for contempt. And in extreme cases, they can order the defendant shackled if they're violent or trying to flee. So the tools exist. The question is, will judges use them on a sitting president? And so far the answer is partially. They'll find him, they'll threaten him, they'll escalate warnings. But actually jailing him, that hasn't happened yet. And it might not, because the political fallout would be enormous. Trump's supporters would lose their minds. Republicans in Congress would scream judicial tyranny. It would dominate news cycles for months. And judges know that. So they're trying to avoid it, trying to get Trump to comply through warnings and fines rather than actual custody. But here's the thing. Every time Trump pushes and nothing happens, every time he walks out or violates an order and the consequences are minimal, he learns that the threats are empty, that he can keep pushing, that judges won't actually follow through. And that's dangerous because it reinforces his belief that he's above the law, that normal rules don't apply to him. And it sends a message to everyone watching. If you're powerful enough, if you're president, you can defy courts and get away with it. And that's not how justice is supposed to work. That's not equal treatment under the law. That's a two-tier system where your ability to follow rules depends on your political power. And once you establish that system, once you make it clear that some people are above the law, you've lost the rule of law entirely. You've become a place where power determines justice instead of law determining it. All right, so let's break down what all this actually means. Because Trump's courtroom behavior isn't just about one guy being difficult. It's about testing the limits of the legal system, about whether judges can enforce rules on the most powerful person in the country, and about what it means for democracy if they can't. Let me give you 3 big takeaways. First, Trump's walkout and gag order violations are deliberate strategy. This isn't Trump losing his temper. This isn't him being unable to control himself. This is calculated. Trump understands that every time he defies a judge, every time he walks out or violates an order, it reinforces his victim narrative. He gets to tell his supporters, see, the judges are biased, the system is rigged, they're trying to silence me, but I won't be silenced. And his base eats it up. They love seeing him defy authority. They love watching him refuse to bow down, because to them, the courts are part of the deep state, part of the corrupt system trying to destroy Trump. So when he walks out, when he violates gag orders, he's not being a problem defendant. He's being a hero, standing up for himself and for them against a rigged system. And Trump knows judges are in a bind. If they don't punish him, he keeps pushing, keeps violating, keeps making a mockery of the process. But if they do punish him, especially with jail time, it feeds right into his narrative. It proves to his supporters that the system is out to get him, that judges are weaponizing their power to silence him. So either way, Trump wins politically. He gets to play victim. He gets to fundraise off being persecuted. He gets to energize his base with stories of how he's being treated unfairly. It's brilliant strategy. Evil, but brilliant. Because it puts judges in an impossible position, where enforcing normal rules becomes evidence of bias, where holding him accountable proves his point about the system being corrupt. But here's the problem with that strategy long term. It only works if Trump never actually faces serious consequences, if judges keep backing down, if the threats of jail never materialize. Because once a judge actually follows through, once Trump ends up in custody, the narrative flips. Suddenly, it's not brave defiance, it's a criminal being held accountable. It's the system working. It's proof that no one's above the law. And that's why Machan's threats matter so much. Because if Trump pushes too far, if he violates the gag order one too many times, Machan might actually do it, might actually order him jailed. And that would change everything. It would prove judges aren't bluffing, that there are real consequences for defiance. And it would force Trump's supporters to defend him sitting in a jail cell for contempt, which is a much harder sell than defending him fighting a rigged system. Second, these courtroom battles are a preview of what happens if Trump ever actually goes to trial on serious criminal charges. Right now, most of Trump's federal criminal cases are paused or dismissed because he's president. DOJ policy says sitting presidents can't be prosecuted. But state cases are different. New York already convicted him, and that case is still moving through appeals. Other states could bring charges. And if Trump ever loses presidential immunity if he leaves office and prosecutors pick up where they left off, we're going to see more of this. More defiance, more gag order violations, more walkouts, more judges having to decide how to handle a defendant who refuses to follow normal rules. And here's what that means practically. If Trump goes to trial on serious charges like January 6 or classified documents, judges are going to have to make hard decisions. Do they revoke bail if he violates conditions? Do they jail him for contempt if he keeps attacking witnesses? Do they proceed with trial even if Trump refuses to show up? These are unprecedented questions. We've never had a former president, let alone a sitting one, facing serious criminal charges and behaving this way in court. So there's no playbook. Judges are making it up as they go, and every decision sets precedent. Every time they let Trump slide, or every time they escalate, they're establishing what's acceptable for future cases, And that matters enormously because Trump's not the last powerful person who's going to end up in court. There will be other presidents, other officials, other wealthy and influential people who think they're above the law. And how judges handle Trump now determines how they can handle those people later. And my fear is judges are going to be too cautious. They're going to be so worried about political backlash, so concerned about looking biased, that they won't enforce rules the way they should. They'll let Trump push boundaries further than they'd let anyone else. They'll give him special treatment out of fear. And that creates this precedent, this standard that says powerful people get more leeway, that normal rules don't fully apply at the top. And once you establish that, once you make it clear the legal system treats powerful people differently, you've undermined the entire premise of equal justice. You've admitted we have two tiers, one for regular people, one for the elite. And that's corrosive. That destroys faith in institutions. That makes people think, why should I follow the law if rich and powerful people don't have to? Third, Trump's behavior is forcing the legal system to choose between enforcement and political peace. And that's a choice no legal system should have to make. In a healthy democracy, the law is the law. You enforce it consistently. You don't care about political consequences. You don't worry about backlash. You just apply the rules fairly. But with Trump, it's different, because enforcing the law on him creates political chaos. His supporters riot. Congress goes crazy. The country gets more divided. So judges have to weigh, is enforcing this rule worth the chaos it'll cause? Is jailing Trump for contempt worth the political firestorm? And that weighing, that calculation that shouldn't be part of judicial decision-making, but it is, because judges are human. They live in the real world, and they can see what's going to happen if they push too hard. And that's how authoritarians win, not by beating the system directly, but by making enforcement so costly, so politically difficult, that the system backs down, that judges calculate it's not worth it, that prosecutors decide it's too hard, and then suddenly the law stops applying. Not officially, not on paper, but in practice, because everyone's too afraid of the consequences to actually enforce it. And Trump's been doing this his entire life, making enforcement so painful through lawsuits and delays and public attacks that people give up, that they settle, that they walk away. And he's trying to do the same thing now with the courts. Make defiance so common, make the political cost of enforcement so high that judges just let him do whatever he wants because it's easier than the alternative. And we're at this critical moment where judges have to decide, do we let Trump get away with it? Do we avoid conflict by giving him special treatment? Or do we enforce the law like we would on anyone else, knowing it's going to cause problems, but doing it anyway because that's what the rule of law requires? And different judges are making different choices. Some are escalating, threatening jail, making it clear there are limits. Others are being more cautious, avoiding confrontation, letting things slide. And we won't know which approach was right until it's over, until we see whether Trump faces real accountability or whether he successfully intimidated the system into letting him off. So where does this leave us? With a former president who walks out of court when he doesn't like rulings, who violates gag orders repeatedly, who treats judges as obstacles to be defied rather than authorities to be respected, and with judges trying to figure out how to handle him, trying to balance enforcement with political reality, trying to uphold the law without causing a constitutional crisis. And it's messy, it's unprecedented, and it's not clear how it ends. But here's what I know. If judges don't follow through, if the threats of jail remain empty, if Trump keeps pushing boundaries and facing no real consequences, then we've learned something important about our system. We've learned that powerful people really are above the law. That if you're president or former president, you can defy courts with impunity. That the rule of law only applies to regular people. And if that's true, if that's the lesson we take from all of this, then we're in way more trouble than just Trump's legal problems. We're in trouble as a democracy. Because democracies depend on the law applying equally, on no one being above it, on powerful people facing the same rules as everyone else. And if Trump proves that's not true, if he walks out of courts and violates orders and never faces real consequences, then the precedent is set. The next authoritarian leader knows exactly what to do: defy, push boundaries, make enforcement so painful that the system gives up. And eventually the system does give up. And then the law becomes meaningless, just words on paper that only apply when it's convenient, when the defendant's not powerful enough to make enforcement too costly. And that's what's at stake here. Not just whether Trump goes to jail for contempt, but whether our legal system can actually enforce its rules on powerful people, whether judges have the courage to follow through, whether the rule of law means something, or whether it's just a concept we pretend applies equally, until someone powerful enough tests it. And we're watching that test happen in real time, in courtrooms where Trump walks out, where judges threaten jail, where everyone's trying to figure out where the real lines are. And the answers we get, the precedents we set, they're going to matter for decades. They're going to determine what kind of country we are, whether we're a place where laws bind everyone or a place where power determines whether laws apply. And right now we're somewhere in between. And this because in which direction we go, that's being decided by judges trying to control a defendant who thinks he's above their authority, and by that defendant testing just how far he can push before someone actually stops him. This is the fight, this is the moment, and honestly, I'm not sure which side wins.